Yeah, mine's ready. Mine's ready. Wasn't that nice? I don't know. You should be fined 100% of your salary for not showing up on time. Right. Anyway, so good morning, everybody. Welcome to Talking Niagara. And Dave and I welcome you all. So today, we're going to be discussing the news that matters to this local area. All right. So to Niagara Falls. And we do this every morning on our talk show, Talking Niagara. There we go. All right. So welcome, everybody.
Welcome. Sorry about being late. I was looking something up and got my typically. I was all ready and set to go, but I started looking stuff up and forgot the time.
Okay. So the region is going to be looking at once again at the Niagara Regional Police Service budget. Right? They want to get an extra $1 million savings from the board, but Police Chief Bill Fordy is mad about this. Well, not mad, but doesn't like the concept. And he's basically was asking for a 15% budget increase, citing the fact that the region's going to grow to somewhere in the region of 700,000 by 2051.
Yeah, and it's important to note, though, that around 50% of the regional budget is allotted to the police. It takes a huge amount of money to support the police force in the region. And also, it's a note back on November 14th, the Region Budget Review Committee endorsed the police, I'm just reading this right off, services spending plan for 2025, with the asking for cuts of $3.65 million. Yeah, you can have your budget, but you got to find $3.65 million to cut. But then when the motion came forward a little later on, Tom Encina from Fort Erie said that he wants even more, another $1 million basically to be found.
And don't go accusing Tom Encina of not knowing what the police force do, because he's a retired RCMP officer. So there you go.
That's right. If anyone would know where all the pork is, he would. Now, he obviously knows that there's pork in the system and it has to be trimmed. He's an experienced police officer. He's been here before. So he wants another $1 million on top of that $3.6 million they asked for before.
Yeah, but this
so they've sent it back.
Yeah, so this is it's $1 million. To put this in perspective, it's $1 million out of the current budget proposal of $213 million, right?
Yes, but that original $213 million was only approved. That budget was only approved provided they trim $3.65 million out of it, and then Encina has asked for another $1 million.
Yeah. So in fact, I'm just trying to put that in perspective so that everybody realizes how that budget is. It's not like $1 million out of 5 million type of thing. It's quite a large.
Now, Encina stresses that.
Yeah.
Now, Encina stresses the fact that this is not putting the public safety in danger or jeopardy. It's about what people can afford. I don't know how he squares that. He's asking for cuts in places that aren't essential services, I guess, or those most important. Like another extra badge, whatever that they might get. I don't know what the small, less significant expenditures of the police might be. But basically, what police need are good vehicles, they need good training, and they need officers. And one of the things that the police need some more of is officers. And if they're brought in all at once, that will be quite a hit. So they're asking if that can be spaced off. The new hires can be spaced out a bit.
Yeah. And Mike Cushman is saying, with a huge increase in population, huge increase in homelessness, how do you propose that we do not need more policing? Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you brought up homelessness, Mike, because the police have always complained, well, not really complained, but pointed out that a large amount of their time is taken up with trivial, which appears to be less than the most important type of calls, and that regards people of homelessness.
Yeah.
And so they're tied up with people with mental health issues or addiction issues and things like that. That takes up a lot of their time. As a matter of fact, I had to phone the police to get a homeless guy out of our building here one time.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, and calls like that are, calls like that are actually time he could have been spending doing something else. Yes, absolutely.
Now, there should be some sort of different agency or aspect of our regional policing, I suppose, where specialists in homelessness or mental health, where where those people are not really a threat to public safety, they're more of a threat to themselves. Those people could, some other sort of group could come in. I don't know, psychiatrists, social workers, or something like that.
Yeah, we might need social workers, but we also do need support of the police, because when you say a person came into your building, I'm not saying he was full with any bad intent, but the way the laws currently are, it's not like you and another person within your building can just kind of escort him out that easily, because you'd be accused of manhandling in such things, even if you weren't doing that. And if he got a belligerent, you could end up being attacked, for example. So those sort of elements are actually police-ish, but at the point when you actually get the individual out the door, then somebody else, some social services or drug addiction clinic or whatever needs to take over.
Well, what happens is the police come and they see a homeless person or a person that's in trouble or is making trouble. They don't want to take them to jail because that's expensive. So and then there's lots of paperwork. So if they get a person that is acting badly or whatever, that takes up their time. And what eventually happens is they try to take them to a place where, a shelter or some other place like that. They quite often phone the family members to see if they'll take them on. And that usually works for a while until the family members can no longer handle it anymore. That's just one kind of incident. So what we need really is some kind of social worker, some sort of means by which to deal with this. And this, unfortunately, is what is driving the idea of the notwithstanding clause too. If you do want to focus in a more strict manner towards the homeless people, the police are not really going to be much help to you overall, except initially maybe. You're going to have a system of people who understand what's going on here and how best to deal with these people. The police are not. The police are there to keep the peace, and seriously, they are limited in many ways. So if a person who is causing a lot of trouble and then goes into a residence of some kind or hotel room that the welfare or the social services have provided them, the police can't go in there and get them out. So there's a lot of things. For instance, if you have a person that has been, I mentioned this before, that you can go to the justice of the peace and get a 72-hour, if you can convince the justice of the peace that a relative or a friend of yours needs to be taken to the psychiatric ward of a hospital, they can do that. The police can do that, and they can get them there for only 72 hours. But if that person is inside a residence or something, they cannot go in and get them. So they have to wait around and try to convince them to come out, but that doesn't happen quite often. So they have to leave the matter unresolved. So there are a lot of things that they're not specialists in dealing with people like that, and it takes up a lot of their time.
Yeah.
So when we talk about the notwithstanding clause, whether we take it on or not, we do need the resources that aren't currently available to deal with homeless and addicted people in a way that's more positive and less time consuming for the police.
But Encina has basically said we need to look at non-frontline things. So he's looking at other budgets.
Yes,
maybe things like computers and things like that.
Well, it also thinks that, like, the police have programs to go to schools. Like, you remember Elmer? Well, you wouldn't remember, but there was an Elmer safety elephant when I was a kid. You get a big cop, all dressed in his uniform from top to bottom, talking to you about road safety, what you have to do, important things. So that kind of an education program might be on the blocks because it's outside the most fundamental thing the police do. However, that kind of a service could be taken over by someone else. I'm not even sure if that still exists, but you might not need a police officer and pay him the big bucks to do that.
Well, I remember, I don't remember that particular program, but in our school we had somewhat similar. I think bringing the police officer there was kind of, oh, okay. There's a bit of, the kids revere the police officer in a way, but I think kids don't revere the police officers anymore, do they?
The little ones might. And you want to get to them at a very early age, I would suppose, to convince them that the police are on their side. And that's very, very important, that there has to be this trust factor out there that the police are not just drinking coffee and slurping donuts on the drive-thru. As a matter of fact, they don't do that anymore anyway. It's my suspicion that they go to the Chinese takeout instead.
Well, actually, the whole point is that that I don't think they ever really did that, even when the donut thing was out there. It was one of these sort of things. What happened is they caught 2 or 3 cops eating the donut thing, and it's taken off ever since, right?
No, actually, it was very common. I remember, because I was a late night dude when I was unemployed. I'd be wandering around, and rather than go to bars, I would go to all night coffee shops and stuff and meet my friends. And there was quite often cops in there taking their break, going, but where else would you go anyway, But I didn't really see them eating too many donuts. Yeah. Back in those days, they'd be having a cup of coffee.
They got a right to a break just like anybody, right?
Of course they do. And remember, their break is subject, if they're needed, they keep the radio with them. If they're needed,
absolutely, they do.
They have to bolt out.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and exactly. So they're waiting for their coffee and their donut at the counter, and suddenly the call comes through, and that's done, isn't it?
Yeah, I would think the services that the police have had to fill in for, like social workers, basically, they're kind of like social workers when they deal with the homeless people. They have to worry about children crossing the roads and all that kind of thing. I think those, and I'm just suggesting these because I didn't even know what functions they do outside of ordinary police forces. And Sandra Marie McKinnon points out here in our says police response to 4,200 more liquor outlets coming 2,500 first, then very day increase business as usual. I don't really get what am I missing?
Because of the new liquor store rules about how corner stores do liquor stores. So if you track media from September 5th implementation, nobody bats an eye of killings. You'll find more crime, more people dying out there. Who cares? Yeah, it's her view. Yeah. And she's also continues, police need mental health training, more than a 2-minute tutorial.
Yeah, that's quite right. And are we really doing certain aspects of the police should actually be sort of schooled in some sort of sociology so that they know who they're dealing with homeless, addicted, and people are on the fringe of society. Like they said, that takes up a huge amount of their time. There's got to be a better way of doing it better. That may take away a lot of their efforts, of their time, basically, so they could be directed other places. And now you have to have enough police officers to do all the many things we ask the police officers to do. That's a thing too. And remember, gunplay. I'm always shocked by the amount of gunplay we're getting here in Ontario. We're used to it in the United States. There was lots of gunplay down there, but I think that's the one thing that we're heading towards that we're going to need more police for, because more guns are showing up and more shootings are taking more violence.
And Mike's asking, how many times are police officers sent to a wellness check and the person they are checking on has got killed?
I don't know how many times. No, I don't.
Probably increasing in our society today, that's for sure. Although that said, we still don't have that many deaths in the Niagara region in comparison to other areas.
Yeah, and the police hands are tied a lot of times when dealing with these things, like I said, like homelessness. Like, for instance, if you go to, if the police get a call for a disturbance and there's homeless or addicted people involved here, now they go out there and like 9 times out of 10, it's just some poor person on the edge of society, not acting well because of the circumstances of his or her life. But that person too could suddenly turn out to be a violent person. It could have a gun and stuff. When I phoned the police to get the homeless person out of this place, one of the questions he asked me right away, is he armed? Is he look like he was could be violent or anything like that? And I had to tell him, no, this guy's he's a cream puff. You can get him out easily. The thing is, he's just distraught and he doesn't know where to do. All he needs is, and I tried to tell him, I said, after he says, okay, we're coming. And I says, you know what, this guy, I think he needs some place to go, a treatment. He could really use a meal or something. And the police officer was short with me. He says, I told you that we're going to come soon. Right. Well,
okay. Right. Okay. So moving on, the Liberals, the Pierre Pollievre keeps finding new dirt on the Liberals. So, it's turning out to be Trudeau being the punching bag for Pollievre.
I don't think that's really very, I don't know. They keep finding stuff that the prime minister basically isn't doing well or not looking well, like dancing at a Taylor Swift concert when there was a riot going on in Montreal. I don't see how he could have.
He couldn't
have known that anyway.
He couldn't have done much about the riot in Montreal if he was at a different location. Whether dancing at a Taylor Swift concert is an appropriate thing for the Prime Minister to do, I don't know. I presume he was there with his children.
Well, sure, he's probably there with his kids, and I mean, you could say it was a bad look. He was having fun while Montreal burned, but seriously, I think Pollievre is really pushing the envelope when he criticizes Trudeau. He's going to criticize him for his haircut. He's going to criticize him for everything, and I'd say that is a negative thing, and he's overdoing it. Stick to politics, Pierre.
Yeah, and that is so. A prime minister has a lot of duties and responsibilities. He also has a right to time off, and presumably the Taylor Swift concert was part of his time off and part of his time with his kids. I don't know there's anything inappropriate about it, right?
Well, isn't it exactly like he was having a party, he was fiddling while Rome burned? No, he went out, he had a planned excursion with his kids, and because he's the prime minister, he got tickets, obviously. So he did enact his privilege there. But aside from that, how would he have been able to do anything when the riot was going on? Do you want him to leave the concert when the police do their job?
I think that would not be right.
You're in Montreal and say, don't do this anymore?
Yeah, I don't know that would be right, because we don't know where the concert was. But if he was in, if he was in the concert, he's got his children.
It was in Hogtown. It was in Hogtown.
Okay, yeah, but he's got his children to think about, right? Okay, it's true that his escort could get the children home, but again, he's kind of, even if he went to the airport, he's still 2 hours away from getting to Montreal, right?
Yes. So when he complains about that, but in this article, it talks about, there's all kinds of things that the liberals are doing wrong, basically, that Trudeau is taking the heat for. Now, ultimately, he is the responsible one, but he has controversies over the employment minister, Randy Boissonneau, with the conflicting Indigenous thing. Like he should, his office, Pierre Pollievre is right about this. His office should have been able to look this over a little bit more ahead of time, and he could have saved the government a lot of embarrassment by getting on top of it, and he didn't. And what Trudeau did was he supported his minister when it's obviously that the guy is being playing a little bit of funniness here, and yet this has been going on. So those are the kind of dirt that he's digging up.
Yeah. And as we sit right now, the Conservatives under Pollievre are at 41.5% on the polls, with the Liberals at 23% and going downwards, and the New Democrats at 18.8% and going upwards.
Yes. Now these things you can blame the Liberal government for. Pollievre's strategy is to zero in on one person only, and that is Justin Trudeau.
Yeah.
As the single person that's responsible for this, in my mind, you have to criticize the Liberal government and the way that it's running. If you keep going after the top guy, it means it's a personality thing, and I'm not so sure that Canadians, particularly me, want to buy that Trudeau is the worst thing since the Nazi Holocaust. Basically, he's like, you really
no. Yeah, absolutely. I'm not buying that in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I don't like Pollievre's approach here. I could see how it's very effective, and I could see how that ultimately Justin Trudeau has to take responsibility for his government's performance. and he has to answer questions of why he wants to support Boissonnault rather than do the right thing and have and say explicitly that Boissonnault is out of the government. He doesn't have a chauffeured car anymore, and he doesn't have the benefits of the of the office. He doesn't. He refuses to deal with the matter, and then when he does it in half measures. Those are the things that, yes, he is responsible for. But when you come up against the scandals that have happened, the green tech scandal, the ArriveCan app scandal and blunder, those things are the government's fault. So you can ask the prime minister why these departments aren't working well and why and what he's doing about it, rather than saying it's your fault, buddy. He's trying to say, like Trudeau goes into every department and say, this is what we're going to do, this is what we're going to do. Ultimately, he's responsible for the functioning of his government, but the government as a whole is the thing that is dysfunctioning. And that's the thing that bothers me about the Liberal government, not so much about their leader. I have issues, of course, with Justin Trudeau and his sort of elitist attitudes and all that, but mostly to me, it is about how poorly his government is functioning. And to make him kind of like the universal bad guy and responsible for all aspects of the government, he does have to take it on the chin for that. But I would, if I was Pollievre, I would dissect the departments and that are coming up with these policies that are just bad or corrupt or overpriced. Betty Zoom says, I do hear screaming out here about Pierre. Yes, I know. Yes, I seen him with Harper at the WEF. But Pierre worked for the House. He was finance minister, and he had to go. Maybe. Yeah, if the current government has tried this, has turned the tables on Pollievre a few times by pointing out what his government was doing when Harper government was in power. So I think that's. But the assassination of a person, like we found in the United States in their election, it was just terrible. There was policies and those other kind of things. It weighed on the character of the person, and I think that's a bad move. And I don't want that kind of American.
Well, Mike makes the point: if they're not a Canadian citizen, if somebody commits a crime and they're not a Canadian citizen, kick them out.
Well, yeah, that's always been an issue here. Well, if you have a criminal, get rid of them. But there are so many processes, and in the attempt to make sure that we're more than fair to everybody, we make it very difficult for us to do the common sense kind of thing of, you've got a criminal, he's come into the country either legally or illegally, he's not yet a citizen. If he's done a crime, get him out. But he has a whole list of rights that that person is allowed. So they have to keep examine his case. In the meantime, his wife has had a couple of kids, and then the government is stuck with, all right, we got this guy, he's a criminal, he stole a car, we want to get rid of him, but he's got a wife and a couple of kids here. Do we get rid of them too? What about the children? They've been gone to school for 7 years because it's taken us 7 years to come to a conclusion on this. So Mike is right. If it was a quick procedure, get a criminal.
Quick procedure. Yeah. How many are doing life in prison? Trump says death can't feed and house them. They did a crime.
Is she saying that Trump is endorsing the death penalty?
I think so. Yeah. I'm not sure. I'm not sure I've heard that from him. But it is a typical, Republicans generally tend to support more death penalty action than do Democrats.
Well, he had a pretty bad record with the Manhattan Five, those five black kids that were set up for the rape of a
so she is saying that he supports the death penalty.
In the United States, they have the death penalty. We don't have it here. I don't believe in it myself. However, every criminal that you put in jail is going to cost the taxpayer a lot of money. But to say that, well, it'll be a lot cheaper to get rid of them through the death penalty is a moral quandary for me in a big way.
It's a big problem for myself as well, because if you find one person not guilty after having killed them, then that's our justice system gone to rack and ruin.
Yes, and we've seen a lot of people saved from the hangman's noose, basically because of DNA or some other evidence that's come forward.
Well,
and
exactly.
Those five young men who were accused of a rape, they were railroaded, and Donald Trump was one of the ones that insisted that they should be, executed. It turned out that they were innocent.
Yeah.
But the United States, and I think probably Canada may follow suit, and I hope not, is one country in the West that has insane amounts of incarceration.
Yeah.
There are enormous amounts of people in the prison system in the United States. It is very, very costly for the taxpayer. In fact, it's going off to private hands. And unfortunately, it's going off to private institutions who build a prison, and the government pays them to do that. And they pay their officers like dirt cheap wages. And do you really want, I don't know, a situation like that? I think the United States, when Trump says stuff like that, and nobody says, how do you reduce the crime? How do you get to the core issues of that crime? Why do we have so much crime?
I have heard them boys and the ones in Canada killed because they've seen a drug deal. In BC, this was apparently.
Yeah, the amount of gunplay that's happening here in Canada, that's the kind of thing we have to come to terms with.
Well, actually, let's move on then to this kind of supposed, the NAFTA spat that they're talking about. That basically Trump's tariffs they're looking at is he's made this question clear, and he said unless you do something about the drugs coming into the United States, we're going to execute tariffs on your thing. So of course they're now looking at how is Canada going to fight back. And point being is that within 15 minutes of that announcement, Trudeau was on the phone to Trump to point out some of the key factors about Canadian trade. And of course, one of the things we do probably for every kilo of drugs that goes from Canada to the US, there's probably 10 coming the other way.
Yeah, I would just like to go back to the article. We kind of got straight of it, and it was the Niagara Regional Police. So I'd just like to remind everybody that they take up 50% of the regional budget, and that and how do you square that? So basically, there has to be means by which their policing can be done a little bit cheaper by taking some of the fluff, or not the fluff, basically bad word there, but those of extraneous issues like homeless people. The same guy 3 times a day makes a nuisance of himself, and the police have to take up time to do this when they could be doing more essential work. Anyway, so now to the NAFTA thing. The NAFTA thing, he's beating his chest. As we mentioned yesterday, Trump wants to blame us in Mexico for the fentanyl problems and the immigration problems that his country faces. obviously, he's being bellicose here and looking like a big bully. But we are going to be facing more illegal immigration than they are from the United States than we are coming back. Trump is not going to be too happy when we start shipping back all the people that crossed illegally from the United States into Canada, because once a refugee gets into a third country, then that once they come into a safe country like the United States, they're supposed to stay there.
Yeah.
So when they cross into Canada, then they have to be turned back and gone back into the United States. And I'm not so sure that we could be saying exactly the same thing. He has said that if Canada does not patrol its borders better and stops people from coming into the country, he doesn't realize if we do patrol the borders better, there are more people going to be sent right back into the
border. There's only one border of any significance in Canada, and that is the common border, the 8,000 kilometer common border that we hold with the United States. Nobody crosses the North Pole border between Russia and Canada.
No, but yeah, definitely.
That's a brave soul that does that trip.
But what his issue is, of course, is this is again back to the management and the sort of short-sightedness of the Canadian government. When the Canadian government lifted visa requirements for Mexicans to come to the country on tourist visas, of course, they flooded into the country and then started trying to get into the United States. And when they couldn't, they were claiming refugee status. And a lot of people come into Canada under visas that are easily got with the intention of getting into sneaking into the United States. Those are the things that the government of the United States is sort of perturbed about. The kind of short-sightedness of the Canadian immigration, thinking that if you bring a whole lot of Mexicans in on tourist visas, they're not going to try to sneak in the United States and irritate our biggest neighbor. But what the United States, I don't think Trump has put this out there, that once he's back in, the same thing that's going to happen when he was in the first time. You're going to get an incredible flow of illegals trying to enter Canada everywhere. If we do patrol the border more strictly, as he says, to prevent people coming from Canada into the United States, I think that would probably be a very good idea, because if we did, we would prevent a lot more illegals coming into Canada from the United States.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, it's interesting because the one thing that the Canadians are talking back upon is, okay, the last time this happened, some of the things that were affected, Canada took aim at last time was things like roasted coffee, yogurt, prepared meals, maple sugar, licorice candy, and other confectionery, pizzas and quiches, cucumbers and gherkins, strawberry jam, right? Orange juice that's not frozen, tomato ketchup, mayonnaise and salad dressing, a few other things like that. There's a whole heap of stuff. Whiskey.
Yeah, the Global News has an article that tells us how we targeted the United States with our tariffs after Trump started his tariffs. So our government targeted areas that would be more irritant towards the Republicans. That was their idea, to sort of irritate the Republican base by affecting those states and those areas that are strongly Republican.
Yeah.
He got away with putting a tariff on aluminum and steel. These things were already taken care of in the NAFTA agreement, but what he did, he was able to say these are essential for the defense of the country. So when he said that these materials were essential for the defense of the country, it put those materials in a different category where they could be put under tariffs. So he changed the rules a little bit. Now what he's so I would say if you want to stock up on things that come in from the United States, do it now before the tariffs go on. And if you get your soy sauce from the United States, you better stock up now. It's going to be a little bit,
Yeah, well, and again, there's a lot of this stuff where we live here within that 100-mile, on either side of the border. There's a lot of stuff that we have that, where we get things like milk and things like yogurt and, things that we get in our stores that have US products within them, even if we don't know, even if they don't have a specifically US label on them, because there's a lot of local cross-border trade in things like agricultural goods. And what we're eating could come from, typically comes from within a couple of 100 miles from us here, might come from the US, might come from Canada. So we're getting that kind of stuff that really is at the basic level when we go to the supermarket. So, like, for example, they're going to put tariffs on roasted coffee, but not decaf coffee.
Yeah, I don't know why. But I think basically what the Trump government's going to find is the farmers in Montana are not going to be too happy about interference in their business, the cross-border agricultural business they have with the Albertans or people from Saskatchewan.
Yeah,
they have a thing going there that's all being settled, and they work pretty good together back and forth. As a matter of fact, the free trade deal actually works very, very well. I think, however, Trump's going to have to want to look like he has had a victory of some kind. The last time the NAFTA agreement came up, it was due for renegotiation anyway, because it was 26 years old when Trump came in to power. So it was due for a revamp anyway. And everybody said that, yeah, well, we were prepared for that for a long time. We have to revisit the trade agreement. The problem was he kind of beat his chest and said we've been taken advantage of by Canada, well, that's not going to happen again. But he's going to have to look for a victory of some kind, and I'm afraid that victory is going to come at the cost of small farmers. We protect our dairy and other products like that, particularly for the sake of Quebec, but also for other ones of our small farmers. And if we open up our markets to inexpensive dairy products coming from the United States, that will pretty much kill the family farm. We may not be able to do anything about that, though, because that is a protectionist thing that we do, and the spirit of the NAFTA agreement is not to have those protectionist policies. But then again, what did Trump do? He put a protectionist policy on aluminum and steel, saying it's essential for the defense of the country. Therefore, ordinary trade deals don't matter anymore. So we can put a 25%. Betty Zoom says, what did Betty Zoom say? Betty Zoom says, but once again, Peter and Dave, great discussions. Have a safe day. Everyone, hugs. Here's a hug for you too, Betty.
Yep. All right.
Thanks for listening.
Yeah, thanks for listening. Yeah. So that, so there's no easy answers on any of these ones. And with the amount of trade that goes across the border both ways, I think typically, it would be the America. If there was that, the Americans would lose more than the Canadians would, I think.
No, I think it would be hurtful for both. And I think it's very important to realize that Trump is beating his chest. Yeah. Like we talked about Howard Lutnick yesterday, who has been put in charge of this. He's had a lot of responsibility given him by Trump. Now, he's not going to be the chest thumper, and he'll have reasons for his tariffs. whereas Trump just wants them. Now, unfortunately for the United States, when Trump, it's attractive to everyone to have somebody to blame.
Yeah.
And if Trump says the reason why we have too much fentanyl in this country and the reason why we have an immigration problem in this country is because of Mexico and Canada, they're the culprits. They're the ones that are letting fentanyl come into our country. They're the ones letting immigrants come into our country. That is really kind of, I don't know, immature, basically. It feels good. It feels good to be able to blame somebody and to hate somebody. You are responsible. It's your fault. It's your fault that this happened. You know what I mean? But that feels good to the people who are listening. Oh, and they're saying, oh, wow, is that the reason why we have so much fentanyl? The reason why you have so much fentanyl and other drugs in the country is the insane appetite of the United States for recreational drugs. And that's insane appetite here as well.
There's a lot of speculation, there's a lot of, it's a big problem, the drugs are, and we can't deny that. All right. And Becky's saying blame shame on those leaders.
Yeah, really. Like, if you were saying, well, the reason why we have such drug problems here is because of Mexico. They're letting the fentanyl get in. Believe me, if they stop up the gaps in Mexico, they're going to find a different way of getting those drugs in there. Because what are drugs? Big money.
Yeah,
huge money. So much so that banks like HSBC look the other way when drug cartels move money through their system. They've been fined a few times for that, but they can't resist it because of the volume of money.
Yeah, exactly. Okay.
Money is the driver here. So if they stop up the border in Mexico, then they're going to find other ways of getting those drugs in there. The fundamental problem is how do you dissuade people from taking them in the first place?
Well, and also, some people would argue it's actually the problem lies because they are criminalized in the US, and therefore that encourages the marketplace in the US. There is a viewpoint out there that I've heard that basically if you decriminalize those drugs, a lot of the problems would go away. I'm not so sure I support that view.
And remember, too, what was the first thing that happened when in a place like Afghanistan? Say what you want about the Taliban, but one of the first things they did was extinguish almost completely the poppy trade coming out of Afghanistan, which dried up a lot of the supply of opium and heroin around the world. What was the first thing that happened when the Allies went into Afghanistan and defeated the Taliban for 20 years, basically? Those poppies grew like crazy, and the world market was flush with opium, and a lot of people were making a lot of money off of it.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So I would we failed to dig into who is making a pile of money off of this and how to stop them. Instead, we get our big banks looking the other way as drug dealers push their cash through the system, make money for the banks. That, to me, is a sin. Those people who are permitting the drug cartels to use the banking system are the ones that should be jailed. What we do is we give them a slap on the wrist.
Yeah. Okay. One other story that I think we need to talk about today is Pope Francis condemns the arrogance of occupiers in Palestine and Ukraine.
Thank you, Pope Francis. Thank you so much.
It's not often I would agree with the Pope, but on this occasion, yes.
Yes, indeed. He has come out against Israel, and that's been a hard thing for the Vatican to do ever since the creation of Israel, particularly when the Vatican cooperated so much with the fascists and the Nazis. They had a pretty tainted history when it came to Jews and gypsies and things like that. They didn't speak out strong enough. And ever since that time, the Vatican has tried to make amends. Basically, they recognize Israel and all that. But now the Pope Francis has taken the unusual step of criticizing Israel sharply on this. And he has got a lot more courage and character than Biden has, and Starmer has, and Macron has, and Justin Trudeau has, and Pollievre has. They should be speaking out harshly against this. This is a person that has a voice that everybody in the world listens to and pays attention to, whether or not you're Catholic or not.
Yeah.
He's a moral and ethical leader of a religion.
Yes.
And he can't stand it any longer. His patience has run out. And
basically he's saying Israel's attacks in Gaza and Lebanon are immoral and disproportionate.
And yes, they are. And the United States keeps saying that we want a ceasefire, but Biden has just dumped a whole more pile of bombs into Israel so they can use them at their discretion. So the hypocrisy of the West, particularly the United States, is too much for Pope Francis to bear in this particular case. I celebrate him saying this. I wish he said it earlier, but I'm glad he's saying it now.
Yeah, and I think it was right to say it, and I'm with you. I wish he'd said it earlier. Where we currently are on this situation is not nice.
No, and he's talked about the Ukraine too, and I think he thinks probably that the Ukraine war need not have happened. That this was this whole thing has to do with power rather than people. He's thinking of the average person. The average person is just cannon fodder in the Ukraine right now. A war that need not have happened. They've lost a generation of young men. Hi, Karen. How you doing? They've lost a generation of young men. I think Pope sees this and sees the geopolitics going around and the chess pieces moved around as some sort of grisly game that doesn't have any sort of essence for the average human being. There's no humanity in this. And that's exactly what's happening in Gaza as well, as he's pointed out, that the occupiers are now telling the occupied that they're the bad people. And if we have to kill 20 kids to get to one Hamas operative, we will. And Pope Francis, thank you for speaking about humanity. I think humanity is getting lost here every day. We forget the amount of atrocities happening in Gaza is day after day after day. The starvation, Netanyahu bragging about how he can control Biden, and then Biden giving him a whole more pile of bombs that he can use in Gaza.
Yeah.
Everybody's like, too many of our Western leaders are going, see nothing, hear nothing. Oh, we shouldn't do that. And I'm very, very upset with our own government and all the three political party leaders for not standing up and saying enough is enough. This has got to stop. This is immoral.
And it's all too easy to remain silent.
And right? Francis also doing. Yeah. And Francis also points out that this is not being conducted with the rules of war. So Pope Francis understands there's going to be wars, unfortunately, but he points out there are rules for war, and they are not being obliged in Gaza. They are not.
Yeah. And because he's criticizing the arms trade, referring to the hypocrisy of talking about peace while waging war.
When I see what's going on in Ukraine, and particularly in Gaza, I see petty people dismissing lives just like that. and saying, oh, we're doing the best we can. And they're not. And every time you give a bomb to Netanyahu, he's going to kill somebody with it.
Yeah.
So don't give him the bomb, and maybe we can get a ceasefire.
Yeah, yeah. And this is part of the problem that we're facing. We're just too many bombs in an area, you know. And
what the Pope is saying,
there.
What the Pope is saying, Palestinians are not children of the lesser God.
Exactly.
Like Hamas killed 1,200 people and took 250 captive. Their 44th, and the payback was 44,000 people, most of them women and children, dead. And we cannot count the amount of people that are buried under the rubble. That might inflate that figure even more. And you've got countless children and people, but children without an arm, without an eye, without family.
Yeah. Oh,
this grotesque ethical, moral situation, I don't know why have we lost our soul here.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I've said before, this is just, we're standing by as Israelis plowing these people into the Mediterranean.
And they are snubbing the United States has said it wants a two-state solution, but will not facilitate that. Will keep allowing the Israelis to take more and more of the West Bank. They're going to chop up Gaza into little pieces. Their aim is very clear. It's right in the Likud party to push the Palestinians and everybody out of those areas and resettle them with Zionists. And the United States says, on one hand, we are not, we don't like that, but here's money to facilitate that.
Yeah.
They are extraordinarily hypocritical.
It's the money flow that is the problem. You know, money flow and bomb flow is the problem.
And it's the willful ignorance of the news agencies in the United States and the West, the willful ignorance of them not educating the average consumer of news about the full and real story back there. We've seen that even Haaretz has been sanctioned. The oldest newspaper in Israel has been sanctioned. First of all, they throw out Al Jazeera, which is a very good news agency. It's as good as any. They throw them out. They don't allow them to report. And then Haaretz, their oldest and most highly regarded news agency, they sanction it because of its criticism of the Israeli government in its operations in Gaza and Lebanon.
Yeah.
So we don't want anybody to know the truth. So we're going to sanction you. We're going to make it hard for you.
Well, and again, I'm coming back to another one of the Pope's points. Dialogue must be the essence of the international community in dealing with both Palestine and Ukraine.
Yeah, he pointed out that the Israeli operatives, negotiators, keep changing the rules so the war can continue, and why we keep putting up with that. Remember, Joe Biden had a peace plan way back in July. Oh well, yeah. In a couple of weeks we'll have it all done. And every time we reported here. I think we reported way back in December, actually, that these rules were happening and that Netanyahu had never come out and endorsed it in public. But Joe Biden kept saying, "Oh yeah, they've agreed to it," and yet Netanyahu never came out and endorsed it. And when asked about that, they say, "How come Netanyahu hasn't agreed with you?" Or hasn't? Well, he doesn't have to. We're talking to the peace negotiators. He never agreed with it in the first place.
No, he never agreed with it in the first place, and it was never something that would really, the Israelis or Netanyahu, not the Israelis, Netanyahu had any intention of following through on.
No, as I said, in the Likud party, the party that he is a part of, says the river to the sea. We talk about how the Palestinians say from the river to the sea, Palestine should be free. But that is the one that predates that is the Likud party, number one in its charter, says from the river to the sea, it should be an Israeli, it should be a Zionist state. In other words, right in their charter, they want the West Bank and Gaza from the very beginning of their party. So every time you get a Likud party member like Netanyahu, that is his principal goal, to get rid of the Palestinians and take their land one way or another.
Absolutely. One way or another. That's exactly what he's after. Yeah, exactly.
And the United States knows that. Every negotiator knows that, but they play this stupid game. And I don't know. There is that aspect. Are the Israelis controlling the United States, or is the United States using Israel as their attack dog?
Okay, so let me ask another question, and I'm going to answer, I don't expect an answer. Could Pope Francis be the agent of peace here?
I wish he was.
Yeah.
I wish he would address the United Nations. I wish he would go to Congress. They let Netanyahu go to Congress, that war criminal, go to Congress and spill his lies, and have all the whole entire Congress clap, and because they know it means votes. They know that the Israeli lobby is very powerful. How about having Pope Francis going to Congress and talking? How about the whoever is directing Doctors Without Borders come to Congress and tell them what they see? They don't want to hear it.
Yeah,
they do not want to hear it.
Yeah. And I would love to see, in this instance, yes, I would love to see the Pope lead negotiations to actually bring peace in both those locations. We've lost sight, and I'm not criticizing you or yourself, but we have generally lost sight of the Ukraine war.
The Ukraine war is a vicious thing, and as you recall, from the very moment that started to begin, even before the invasions, I was extremely suspect of this whole thing because it need not have happened.
Yeah,
was the Minsk agreements that were being negotiated from the war that began. Remember, it began back in 2014 when there was a turmoil in the Ukrainian government, and they had a coup and got rid of their president. And there was a whole lot of nationalist fervor, and they wanted to take Russian and get Russian, disallow Russian being spoken in the country, and all that kind of thing. That is all being glossed over. Azov Brigade, nobody talks about them anymore. They were the Nazi-like brigade, the Ukrainian brigade. So what the press wants to do and what the governments want to do here is make it a black and white situation. It is not a black and white situation. It is not a good, bad thing. I don't think it was a good thing that Putin invaded, but he really wasn't given much choice by the expansion of NATO. Back when the Soviets permitted East Germany withdraw from East Germany and allow East Germany to rejoin Germany. One of the reasons why the Soviets were in the eastern part of Europe is a buffer zone from future invasions. And they told them that we would not expand NATO, but then they did. 4 years after, from 1990, they promised them they would not expand NATO, but they did.
Yeah.
Right away, 1994, Clinton expanded NATO, and they did it another 2 times after promising they would never do it.
Yeah. Yep. And I think we're going to have to call it quits at that point.
Pray for peace, everyone. Pray for peace. And without further ado, I bid you do.